Hey GBA fans, it's Choice CJ here, back again to do the Game of the Week and Season Award Watch with my partner in crime, Jamesanity.
Hello.
And this is Week 11, which does mean there's only one more week of GBA action left. That's going to be very exciting for our series because once the season is up, we will be handing out our actual awards for the different offensive, defensive, coach of the season categories. This has been a long season of speculation up to this point. Finally, someone's going to be taking home the hardware soon. But before we get to that, we do have our options for Game of the Week to discuss. And my choice for Game of the Week was the match between the Milwaukee Saucebucks and the Olalla Athletic. Now, this game didn't really have too many implications on the playoff race. In the previous weeks, I've kind of been focusing on matches in the playoff race. But strictly speaking, this was the closest game of this week. And I think both coaches had a chance to win all the way up to the final turns. Crobat was looking like it would be a really big threat this match because it was banded and there was no flying resist on the Saucebucks side. There was a turn later on in the game after the Como-O had revenged the T-Tar where Crobat was now in looking down that Como-O. Steve predicted the U-turn and left his Como-O in. I think this was a decent play for Steve because it's not like he could switch in anything anyway to take the Brave Bird, so he just had to choose something to fodder off. And on the off chance that Callum did overpredict, it would definitely pay off for him. From Callum's perspective, I don't think that there was any reason to click anything but Brave Bird because, as I mentioned, it does 2-hit KO everything on the team. Later on, we find out that the Como-O is substitute Dragon Dance. This was really threatening, but unfortunately, Steve didn't EV the Como-O to outspeed a max speed Crobat at +1. I'm not sure why he invested so much into bulk and not enough into speed, but as it was, the Como-O looked like it could have been a huge threat at that moment, but fearing the Infiltrator Brave Bird, it had to switch out into Licky Licky. The biggest problem for Callum's team this game turned out not to be that Como-O, but actually the Mimikyu. The Mimikyu was a Sash set and was able to get 3 kills onto the Athletics this game. The Focus Sash was really pivotal late in the game because it allowed it to take an Iron Head from Moldbreaker Excadrill. One thing I didn't know before this match that I learned is that in that situation where you do just get the flat out damage and you don't break the disguise because of Moldbreaker, you still have that disguise intact for the next Pokemon that attacks you. So Emboar, it might have been able to do some cleaning in the late game if it was able to kill the Mimikyu, but because it still had the disguise, it was able to live the Sucker Punch, of course, and kill it back with a Shadow Sneak. One thing I do wonder about that might have made this game play out differently was the freeze on the Shaman. Como-O went down to Shaman's Dazzling Gleam, and then Assault Vest Starmie came in and starts clicking Ice Beam. With the Giga Drain recovery, the Starmie wouldn't have been able to 2-hit KO the Shaman, and Shaman had a really good shot of killing with 2 Giga Drains, but the Shaman did get frozen before it could click that second Giga Drain. So it makes you wonder, you know, the Shaman would have been at a low amount of health, so maybe it wouldn't have been a huge deal. But having just that one extra sack in the late game to play around Scarf Kartana would have been really nice. You know, another one of those situations, just like we seem to have every week, where you kind of wonder what might have happened if the match had played out differently, if there hadn't been luck on one side or the other. But as it was, I thought this was a really cool match, went down to the wire, and it's nice to see two of our coaches who aren't necessarily in the playoff race still give it their best shot. Jamesanity, do you have anything to say on this match?
Yes, I do, and the big reason why I didn't pick it is because it didn't seem like either player was really playing at their best potential. Like, Callum brought Roar, Tyranitar with a soundproof Como, which I believe happened in their previous match, and Steve didn't really EV his Como right. It just didn't seem like either player was playing at their best, and as you mentioned, this didn't really matter too much in terms of playoffs and playoff contention. This match kind of felt unimportant.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. The prep was a little bit odd on both sides. I think they could have been a little bit more thoughtful in the prep there. Why don't you tell us about your game of the week, Jamesanity?
Alright, so I chose a match that did matter in playoff contention, the New Orleans Pelipers and Pokemon versus the San Diego Chimchargers and Lord MV. One thing I do have to mention is it's revealed super early in the game that Cresselia has no attacking moves, which definitely matters in the rest of the game, and it has Reflect and Light Screen, which also matters tremendously. So Cresselia did a lot to help the Chimchargers, but also did a lot to hinder them because it didn't have any attacking moves. Natural Gift Skarmory showed its face in front of the Magnezone with the Natural Gift Ground, killing it after it's been weakened by the Melodic. It's actually unclear what happened in the real battle, as it appears that it went for a natural gift on the Reflect, and Magnezone lived with a slimmer of health, leading to a Brave Bird kill, but I still have to mention natural gift ground Starmie, because that is some superb prep on John's part. And after that, all John had to really do was prevent the Dragonite sweeping or the Kingdra sweeping. Kingdra wasn't really a problem, as it died really soon after the Magnezone died as well. Revealing the Landorus Therian to be Scarfed, outspeeding John's Jolteon, kind of affected the rest of the match, as John knew that the Landorus was Scarfed and was able to play around that. Speaking of the Landorus Therian, in a surprising turn of events, MV Lunar danced from the Cresselia into the Landorus Therian, and John scored a crit on the Landorus Therian, killing it off. Obviously it hurt MV, but it also kind of hurt John in a way, because the Reflect was up for one more turn. That pretty much prevented John from winning the game for a little while. John's subs were really important. With the Melodic and the Jolteon, they put in quite a bit of work, and the Cresselia not having any attacking moves was really detrimental to MV, as I see it as lost the game for him. I don't know if it's that big of a deal, but it definitely mattered when it came to differential at least. So that's my thoughts on the Pelipper's versus the Chimp Chargers. CJ, do you have anything to add to that?
I think you covered it pretty well. I don't have all too much to add. Kind of like you said, the real issue with MV's team was that the Cresselia didn't have any attacking moves, and it was very easily exploited by both of the Mons on John's team that had Substitute. John just basically counter-teamed MV this week. It was really pretty amazing. I'm looking forward to these guys potentially meeting up in playoffs, assuming that they can both win their first round games. Part of the reason I'm excited for that is because John sort of showed his whole hand in this match, like, you know, with the natural gift Skarmory and Sub-Melodic and things like that, really bringing out all the stops, while MV hasn't really revealed any of his best sets other than what he brought in the week 2 game, where I think he won 5-0, maybe 4-0, I don't recall exactly. Make sure you guys tell us down in the comment section below what you thought was the best game of the week. We always love to hear your opinions and talk with you guys on which games were the best from that given week. And now we will move on into the Season Award Watch. And I think this week here is some of the most movement that we've had in the last couple of weeks. We have a couple new faces that we'll introduce to you guys. Just as we always do, we'll do the offensive Pokemon of the season, defensive Pokemon of the season, and coach of the season. We are leaving our number 1 Pokemon for the offensive category in its position. That is Cobalion. Now, Cobalion's on thin ice here. Cobalion's gotten 1 kill in the last 5 weeks. It's come to 4 of those 5 games, so it's not like it's not getting kills simply because it hasn't been coming to games. It just hasn't been able to put in the work. Chase has brought some more defensive sets. He's brought like some special sets, some with rocks. You know, after a lot of early season success, it got 13 kills in the first 6 weeks, but hasn't done very much since then. The next Pokemon that we'll put up here is a newcomer, and that is Victini from the St. Louis Rampardos. Victini has had a very quiet season, but a very consistent season. It's had 5 weeks throughout the season where it's had at least 2 kills, and it's gotten 1 kill or more in 9 out of the 11 weeks. So it's probably been the most consistent Pokemon of this season. It's just been under everybody's radar because it doesn't have a huge sweep under its belt. It could have potentially gotten a huge sweep in the match versus George when it had the Trick Room weakness policy set, but because of an unfortunate crit, he wasn't able to pull that off. So Victini is up here in this category. And our last Pokemon is actually the new kill leader. After how many weeks of Cobalion being on top, Heatran has displaced Cobalion. It has scored 9 kills in the last 3 weeks, topping it off with a 5-kill performance this week versus the Philadelphia Scizors. It was a simple Scarf set and was able to OHKO a lot of Chimp's Pokemon with Fire Blast or Flamethrower. Heatran is kind of an odd one. It's been sort of like Cobalion, where it was really cold for a lot of the season, but it's had a couple weeks where it's just been amazing. It has 3 weeks where it's had 3 kills or more, and then 5 weeks where it's gotten no kills, another week where it wasn't brought. Very interesting category here. I'm interested to see how the final week plays out, because I think it's going to really depends on who gets the best performance in week 12. That'll sort of dictate who wins this award. Jamesanity, why don't you tell us about the defensive Pokemon of the category?
Unfortunately, we did kind of have to shorten this list a bit, as a couple of the Pokemon on there weren't performing the past few weeks, so we decided to cut them. Firstly, we have the Melodic from the New Orleans Pelipers. It displayed quite a show this week with a substitute Dragon Sales set, taking advantage of the Cresselia and doing something for the past few weeks, which it hasn't really done too much, keeping it at the #1 spot in our defensive list. It's been there for quite a while, and it's going to stay there. Pyukumuku is still here. It did okay this week. It baton passed a couple of times and lived on a practical 1%, but it also missed 2 Toxics, which was really unfortunate. I guess it's not the Pyukumuku's fault, but it is still something we have to dock it for. But it still makes its way onto the list, and it's a pretty tight race between the Melodic and the Pyukumuku right now, so it's going to depend on how both of those Pokemon do in Week 12 to see which one will win the Defensive Mon of the Season award.
And then in our final category, the Coach of the Season, we have had a singular team up here for the last several weeks, that being the San Diego Chimchargers, coached by Coach MV. And I think I'll still give them the spot here, given that they have the best record in the league. They are 9-2 going into the final week. And they do have the best differential by 2 points. They have a plus 22 differential versus the San Francisco Arcaniners, who have a plus 20 differential. But I feel like it's actually a pretty close race. You could, of course, say that Envy's got a good case. Coaches like Chimp and George have had consistent seasons. Mono has also have a very good record, but I feel like his season has really tailed off recently. And then there's a couple coaches who kind of were on the downturn at the midpoint of the season that have really brought it on lately, those being Gio and Tom. I think there's a case to be made for any of these coaches. Jamesanity, what do you think?
I can make a case for almost every single one of these coaches, but there's a couple that I also have to mention. One being Crimson and the Detroit Steel Wings, simply due to the improvement factor. He just stepped into the GBA after a couple seasons off and did surprisingly well, and he's still in playoff contention for the last week, so congrats to Crimson. And I do also want to mention John of the New Orleans Pelipers triumphing in a lot of matches that didn't really look to be in his favor. I think he had some of the hardest matchups in the season, and he is 7-4 with an 11 differential currently, which is still pretty good. I have to give him props for that.
If you had to give me your top 2, who would they be at this moment?
Probably MV and George.
Gotcha. For me, I think I would go with MV and then Gio. Those would be my top 2. But again, it'll really come down to the Week 12 performances. There's not a whole lot of games that are going to be played next week that have a lot of meaning in terms of playoffs. But in terms of deciding these awards, there's going to be a lot of important games. So I'm looking forward to that. I hope you guys are too, and I do hope that you guys enjoyed this week's video. If you did, make sure you leave a like down on the video below. And also make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can keep up to date on all of the latest analyst content. And of course, make sure you check out our coaches so you can catch the final week of GBA action. Jamesanity, do you have any closing words?
Not really, just take it away.
Well then, on behalf of Jamesanity and myself, we do want to thank you guys for watching. And until the next time, we'll see you guys later.